Glad to have all of you here, and we're going to have a good time. We're going to try to keep this 15 to 20 minutes max. So, Lord willing, let's do that tonight. And we're going to be coming on every day if I can. There'll be times I'll be out of town or I'll be in the truck. I'm hoping I can keep these going even on the road. And so we've been discussing church apostasy, and this will go along with that again. We've been talking about pastors, evangelists, things like that. What's the purpose? What's the duties? What are they all about? What's the pastor's job? What's the evangelist's job? And so if you see, on Facebook you can't see it, but on YouTube you see my thumbnail. Pastors, the problem and the solution. And I've said this before, and I'm going to say it again here. But let me give you the date here first. This is April the 23rd, 2025. The time is 8:13 p.m. Central Standard Time. And we want to welcome everybody to the program tonight. We're going to be very brief tonight, much briefer than normal. And we're going to try to keep these to 20 minutes if we can going forward here. There'll be times that's not possible, but all right. So fasten your seatbelt, get your Bible. If you got a Bible, we're going to be in Hebrews 13. We're also going to be in Ephesians 4. I'm going to probably start in Ephesians 4, and but put your finger in Hebrews 13 because we're going to go there as well. So all right, we are. Let's get the show on the road. I know it takes a few minutes before people find us and get on. We've got a few people on Facebook. We got a few people on YouTube. So let's just go with it, okay? Ephesians chapter 4. Now, my title, as you see on the thumbnail, hey, Brother John. I kept John up. John and I talked for a couple hours, I think, last night, and had a good chat. And my phone went dead. He called me just a few minutes after we got off. And we talked for a long time. My phone died. And so bad with that sometimes. Not with the phone dying, but with talking too much. All right. We got a better crowd on YouTube than we do on Facebook at the moment. But we had over 1,800 people saw last night's. And so Facebook at the beginning jumps up there, but YouTube stays on a while and stays there for weeks and continues to grow where Facebook fizzles out. So anyway, what do we got here? We got John is here, and remember, Brother John, don't steal my stuff that I gave you last night. I better not see you doing a live stream talking about my stuff, and until I get it out there. Anyway, he knows what I'm talking about. I'm joking, but I do have something pretty interesting that I'm going to be sharing, and I'm going to be putting a booklet together called The Church in the Wilderness, and it's going to be very helpful to pastors and evangelists, and very needed, very needed. We are lost, my friends. We are lost. We're out in left field. I mean, we've lost our way. We don't understand what baptism is anymore. I'm talking about my brethren, my independent Baptist brethren. We don't understand baptism anymore. We've got to get back to the Bible. We got to get back inside the tracks here. We got to get back inside the gate, and we got to get right on these things, folks. And see, I know my calling. I know what God has called me to do. I'm an evangelist. I pastored 3 times. I'm an evangelist. God has called me to be an evangelist. And God has called me mainly to the prophecy ministry. But what I'm talking about with this apostasy is prophecy. This thing about apostasy. Okay? So, Ephesians chapter 4, verse 11. It says this, And he gave some apostles. And we talked about this. There are no apostles today. None. None. Zero. There hasn't been for 2,000 years. An apostle had to have seen him in his resurrected body. He had to have seen and heard him. And there are no apostles, they have not been for a long time. No prophets. He gave some prophets. There are no prophets today because we have all the scripture now. And some evangelists and some pastors and teachers for the perfecting of the saints. What is the job of the pastor? For the perfecting of the saints. What is the job of the evangelist? For the perfecting of the saints. How do these two men work? The pastor has a flock. God calls a man to pastor a flock, a local flock in a city or town or community. Okay? And you reach what you can there. You reach out as far as you can. You reach the poor, you reach the rich, you reach everyone you can, and you support the starting of churches around the world as much as you can. That's the Great Commission. And, okay, but your first priority, pastor, is your church. Without the church, the missions are gone. You say, well, I'm going to devote most of my ministry to missions. Well, when your pastor flops, when the church flops, guess what happens to your mission work? It's gone. You got to take care of home first, and then reach out. Okay. So, my title, the problem is the pastors, and the solution is the pastors. Now, what am I talking about? I'm talking about if there's a problem in your church, if there's a doctrinal problem or an immorality problem in the church, if apostasy is creeping in the church, it's the pastor's fault. I promise you, I'm right about this. It is the pastor's fault. If there's a church that has gone into the doctrine of Calvinism, whose fault is it? The deacon's fault? Is it the Sunday school teacher's fault? They can share in that fault, but I'll tell you who's at fault. The man of God, the pastor. What does the pastor do? He's the shepherd of the flock. What does the shepherd do for the sheep? He leads those sheep. Now, if those sheep don't follow him, they get left behind. Okay. Now he'll try to scoop them up. He'll try to keep them with the flock. But listen, if a sheep refuses to follow the shepherd, you can't. That's it. He goes his way. But for the most part, the flock, which represents the church, the flock is led not by the deacons, not by the guy who's been in that church since last he was a pup. The guy who's responsible and who leads that church into doctrine and into what they believe and into Christian living is the man that stands behind the pulpit. We call him the pastor. The Bible also calls him the bishop of the church. Are you listening tonight? I'm trying to help you. By the way, you say, do you not like pastors? I pastored 3 times. Of course I like pastors. God's called me to help pastors. I'm an evangelist. And I'd like to help more pastors. And that's what I'm trying to do tonight. I want you pastors that are watching, and those of you that this is going to be shared to, and maybe a week down the road you'll look at this. I'm trying to help you. I'm telling you this: if the church is in a mess, the pastor's the problem. That's what the title says up there. If there's a problem at the church, there's a problem with the pastor. Now, I could take you to Acts, let's see. Acts, 1 Corinthians, I'm sorry. I think it's 1 Corinthians. In 1 Corinthians, a problem came up. And by the way, Paul shows up at that church really doing the work of an evangelist. Now, he was a church planter, but he became an evangelist, I believe. in a sense. He was no longer, he was not. There came a time when he would go back to the churches he started. He was going back, I believe, as an evangelist to try to steer and help the pastor stay on the right track. That's the job of one of the jobs of the evangelist. See, in the Old Testament, Moses is the type of the pastor. So is David and others. People argue all the time. Oh, no, they're not types of they're not New Testament pastors. I didn't say they were New Testament pastors. I said they're shadows and types of the pastor. I can prove that. I can give you scripture for that. And we did a couple weeks ago, or a couple of shows ago. And we'll do that some more in the future. And, the children of Israel is them leaving Egypt, crossing the Red Sea into the church in the wilderness. Those were types and figures for us, for our ministries, for our churches. Now, something came up in Corinthians, the church in Corinth, in chapter 1 Corinthians. Paul said it is commonly reported that there is a man in the church who has his father's wife. And that means what you think it means. And now, what is that? What is that he's talking about? He's talking. I believe it's a stepmother, and more than likely the father's dead, but we don't know. We're not given all those details. But so Paul is upset. Do you know who Paul is mostly upset with? Not that man. He's upset with the church of Corinth. What does he say? Why have ye not put him out? That he, turned him over to Satan, that he could be saved and got right with God. And by the way, in 2 Corinthians, he is brought back, restored back to the church, into fellowship. And Paul was upset with the leadership of the church, the pastor, the bishop, and his circle of leadership there as the church. Paul was upset. Why have ye not put him out? He was upset. You see, if there's a problem in the church, the problem is the pastor. The pastor didn't do his job. How could he not have known? Of course he knew. Of course he knew. Paul said it's commonly reported among you that this is happening in your church. Why have you not put on? He's talking to the pastor. If there's a problem at the church, the problem is the pastor. Are you listening tonight? I could give you dozens of illustrations just off the cuff. I don't even have a note. I was just talking to a friend of mine, Brother Howard, and he said, "Have you got it out? You got your notes ready?" I said, "I don't have any notes tonight," and sometimes I do, but I don't tonight. And the 1 Corinthians thing wasn't even planned; it just came into my head, and there it was. Good illustration. By the way, what's the solution to church problems? The pastor. He's the problem, and he's the solution to the problem. Now, the pastor evidently did something. Got that man put out of the church. Church disciplined him. And when you get to 2 Corinthians, Paul mentions him again, that man was restored and he was right with the Lord. And who did that? The solution to the problem is the pastor, the guy who many times is the cause of our problem. I'm not saying the pastor caused that man to sin. I'm not saying that. I'm saying there's a problem in the church, oftentimes because the pastor is not dealing with things. He's not leading. He's not spending time with his flock. He's spending too much time on the internet trying to correct somebody else's faults and trying to rebuke some other pastor instead of being in his flock and dealing with the flock that God made him the overseer over. Is anybody listening? God did not call you, pastor, to interfere in another church. God did not call you to that ministry. And Patrick, I'll try to call you when I get off of here. I know you called me earlier. I'll try to call you um, as soon as I get off here. And so let me see if there's anything in here that I need to address. Let's see. Nope, I don't see anything. So the pastor is the problem. I don't care what it is. I don't care what's going on. Again, I'm not saying if a man goes into sin in your church, I'm not saying, don't misunderstand. I'm not saying you caused that or you made him do it, or I'm saying if you don't deal with it and that issue becomes a problem and your church drifts, I'm saying you're the problem, pastor. Something goes on in your church, like 1 Corinthians. That man, we're not sure exactly all that it entails there. It literally says, it is commonly reported among you that there's a man in church who has his father's wife. You get the feeling that this is an immoral issue here. And it was not dealt with. The man was showing up at church, maybe with her. I don't know. Doesn't say. But the issue is there, and the pastor did not deal with it. And Paul is not upset with the man so quite as much as he is with the church not dealing with that man, because the problem becomes the pastor if he doesn't deal with it. And you know why pastors don't deal with it? Some of them just don't have a backbone. They don't have a spine. They're scared. They don't want to confront people. Another reason that some pastors don't deal with these issues is they don't know about it. They're not paying attention. They're preaching 3 or 4 times a week, and that's it. They're not spending time with their people. They're not visiting. They don't know what's going on with their people. Shame on you. Shame on you. Why don't you quit? Go sell cars. And we say that all the time, like selling cars is bad. And I met a pastor at a car lot yesterday. Had a great conversation with him. Really enjoyed fellowshipping with him. He might be on here tonight. I don't know. And there's nothing wrong with selling cars. But I'm saying some of you, if you're not doing your job as a pastor, you ought to turn in your resignation. Go get a job somewhere that you got a passion for. I'm convinced many of our pastors, and I'm convinced I don't see the call of God in them. And I'm not saying they're not called. I'm not God. I don't make that decision. Now, if I was doing the ordaining, I'd make that decision. And I would not ordain somebody that I did not believe was called. But I'm convinced that some of our guys, I just don't see the gift of the calling of God in them. And it's sad. But if they're in the ministry, somebody ordained them, hey, it's out of my hands. And but I'm telling you, some of them I don't see the gift of teaching in them. I don't see that they're apt to teach. I don't see that they understand what preaching is, and they don't seem to have a passion. I wonder sometimes. Now, Pastor, let me read you something. Hebrews 13. This is for you pastors again. Hebrews 13. Now, in verse 7, he says, remember them which have the rule over you. Now, this is to the people. Remember them which have the rule. Notice that word rule. Who's he talking about? He's talking about the bishop, the pastor. Remember them which have the rule over you, who have spoken unto you the word of God. No doubt about that. That's the men of God, right? Then it says, whose faith follow. Don't follow the man, follow the faith of the man. And what is faith? Faith is believing that God will do what he said in this book he will do. Follow the faith of the man that believes this book, whose faith follow. If he gets off track, don't follow him off the tracks. Pray for him, talk to him, try to get him, if you can, and try to influence him back on the tracks, give him some literature, whatever you can do. If he goes into heresy and you can't stop it, get out of there. Don't follow him down that road. Don't follow a wolf, that's whose faith follow, considering the end of their conversation. Now, turn over to verse 17. So it's Hebrews 13, 7 and 17. You can remember that, right? 17 hits it again a little different here. Obey them. Obey them that have the rule over you. All right, that's to the people again. He's talking to the followers. Obey the man of God whose faith follow. Obey him. But then he says something else in this verse that I want you pastors to see. And submit yourselves. So obey, submit. For they watch for your souls. He's talking about the pastors now. The pastor watches for your soul as they that must what? Give account. Give an account. Not for their soul, for yours. Not for their life, for yours. Not for their backslidden condition, for your backslidden condition. That they may do it with joy and not with grief. What I'm getting at is this, Pastor, and we're already at 20 minutes. What I'm getting at is this. The pastor will answer to God for everything going on that's within his bishopric, his control. You'll answer to God. You're responsible for what's going on in your church. That's right. That's right. I had somebody, I don't know, a few weeks ago. He said, "Yeah, Brother Good, I preach here, and I try to preach to the people. Now I've got some staff members that are online, and they're teaching some stuff that I don't think I agree with, and but that's their business." And I said, no, that's not their business. That's your business, Pastor. You're going to answer to God for that. They're a preacher in your church, and they're preaching something that's not right, that's wrong, maybe heresy, or maybe just vulgar. I don't know. Let me tell you something, Pastor. If they're in your church, if they're somebody under your ministry, you better deal with that, because, like I said at the beginning, you become the problem when you don't do your job as the pastor. If you don't deal with that sheep that's gone astray, the sheep that's gone into some false doctrine, if you don't deal with that staff member, you will deal with the results of that staff member infecting your people and causing that church to drift. Yes, you can blame it on that staff member if you want, but let me tell you, you look in the mirror, it's you standing in the need of prayer. You're the man of God. And you didn't have the backbone, you didn't have the gall to go to that man privately and say, you're going to put a stop to that. You're not going to preach that stuff anymore, or you'll have to leave the church. We don't believe that here. Do you see what I'm saying? Hebrews 13, 17, submit to obey them to have the rule of you. Submit to them as he who must give an account. That's right. The pastor will give an account. I believe this. I believe, and I pastored 3 times, I believe that I was responsible for every Sunday school teacher in my church because I put them there. Now, sometimes you inherit some Sunday school teachers, and you know what? You're going to have to deal with that. You're going to have to try to go slow. You're going to have to try to teach them. But if they don't get on board, you got to deal with that, because you're going to answer to God if that Sunday school teacher is teaching something contrary to what is right. If you don't, this is how churches begin the process of gradually apostatizing. The pastor doesn't deal with these things, and doctrines start coming up that are wrong, and you don't want to cause a fuss. You're a little scared to go to this guy, and well, what if he leaves? He'll take all these families with him. What do I do then? You come and you preach like you always do, and you go out and you go get some more people. But you can't turn the other cheek to false doctrine. Paul came to the church in Corinth, was very upset because the pastor did not deal with immorality in his church. By the way, Paul did not come to that pastor and yell at him for not dealing with, my goodness, listen to this, folks, listen to this. Paul did not come to the pastor of the church in Corinth, and say, look, there's a guy a couple hundred miles from here that's pastoring, and it's commonly reported that he's messing around with the secretary in his church. And a preacher, why haven't you preached about that? Why haven't you preached to your flock how wicked that is? Now, it's okay to preach that that's wicked. But Paul didn't come to the pastor at Corinth to tell him to deal with something and rebuke somebody at the church at Ephesus. Are you listening? That's what's going on today. We're preaching and exposing sin in somebody else's church. It's none of your business, Pastor. None of your business. None of your business. Paul didn't come to the church in Ephesus and tell them, how come you guys haven't rebuked the church in Corinth? How come you haven't rebuked them? They've got a guy in there that's got his father's wife. How come you guys haven't picketed outside of his church? Wasn't the church in Ephesus' problem, was it? Is anybody listening tonight? I'm trying to help you pastors. I'm trying to help you get right with your church, get right with what you're supposed to be doing in the ministry. My goodness, forget somebody else's church. Pastor your church. I guarantee you there's enough problems in your church to keep you busy so you don't have time to mess with someone else's church. But what do? We sit in our office, drive in our car, we're on that phone. Man, did you hear about so-and-so? Yeah, I'm sad to say I've heard about too many so-and-sos, and I wish I hadn't heard of some of them, because the truth is, many of them are not true that we hear about. And this gossip gets spread all over the countryside. It's a stinking, rotten shame. It's sin. It's sin. We're spreading lies. I said this before. Preachers are the biggest gossips in the church. They can be. I'm not saying all preachers are. There's some good men out there. And I'm trying to help some of you. I am. I'm trying to help some of you. We have got to get back to the fundamentals of this book here. Paul did not go to the church of Ephesus and tell them about what was going on at the church in Corinth, did he? He went to the church in Corinth and he dealt with the pastor there and said, look, why have you not corrected this? Now, why has it got to be corrected? Because there's a black spot in the church. It's got to be dealt with. There's a man in the church, one part of the membership, and he's, I guess, shacking up with his father's wife, probably a stepmother. And it was wrong. It was immoral. Whatever it was immoral. And if they didn't deal with that begins to hurt the whole church. And if you don't deal with false doctrine being spread in your church by a Sunday school teacher, a deacon, or assistant pastor, whatever, if you don't deal with it, I told somebody today on the phone, you can have a guy in your church that's not pre-trib. That's fine. You can have them. You can handle that. Until that man begins to go behind your back, behind the shepherd's back, and starts to indoctrinate the sheep behind your back, trying to sway them against your point of view to believe in a mid-trib or post-trib, then it becomes a problem that you, pastor, better deal with. Now, don't throw a guy out. He comes to your church a couple of Sundays. You find out he's post-trib. Don't throw the guy. What's wrong with you? My goodness, don't you have enough Bible knowledge? Can't you give it a shot? Try to help that guy. Try to show him what the truth is. I'll tell you why. Because we're afraid. We're afraid. We don't want to confront people. We'd rather he just leave. Oh my goodness, you're there to try to teach. Show that man the pre-trib rapture in the Bible. Show it to him, and he may come your way. But if he doesn't, if he doesn't try to indoctrinate other people, leave him alone. But if he goes behind your back, starts to infect the sheep, you got to put a stop to it, and you may have to do it publicly from the pulpit. And This is tough. I know it, Brother Goodman. This will hurt people. I'll tell you what hurts people. When apostasy sets in, and 10 years down the road, your grandchildren don't have a church to go to anymore. That's what hurts people. Now, be a man of God, understand the whole picture here, and realize I got to keep the body right. I got to keep this church right. Sometimes I'm going to have to rebuke somebody. Isn't that what Timothy says? Reprove, rebuke, and exhort. Sometimes there's rebuking needed. And sometimes you lose that person. Sometimes you gain a great church member. But you got to have a backbone. And you got to be called of God. You got to know what you're called to do. You're called, pastor, to lead that flock into the right doctrine, into the right practices, into the right moral beliefs and standards and dress morality and all this stuff. That's your job, pastor. And if you're not willing to do that, get out of the ministry. For goodness sakes, get out of the ministry. If you're going to attack other churches and other pastors, get out of the ministry. For goodness, go write a book. Go get you a podcast somewhere. Get out of that church. I'm serious. God called you, pastor, to that flock, that local body there. You ought to be so busy there you ain't got time to mess with somebody else's church or hear the gossip about some other pastor, some other youth leader, something going on in somebody else's church. Is anybody sick of it yet? Anybody sick of it yet? And then, what's going on now? If you preach like Brother Goodman, that looks, it's not your business. That church is busy. Let them deal with it. And by the way, Paul dealt with all of them. He was more of an evangelist. That was his job. That wasn't the pastor of Ephesus' job to deal with the pastor of Corinth. It was the evangelist. It was Paul's job. He started many of those churches. He had an influence there. He had some leadership there, and that's why when he came back, he says it's commonly known. Why haven't you done something, Pastor? And that guy snapped to it. You're right. I've put this off too long, and they dealt with it. And that man got right with. He was restored. Okay, 2 Corinthians. So you will give an account. You will give an account for what's going on in your church. You will not give an account to what's going on at the church in Ephesus, or the church in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, or the church in Podunk, Maryland, or the church in Foxtrot, or what's the name of that town? Some funny name here in Kentucky, but you're not giving an account for anything that goes on in somebody else's church. You're going to give an account for what your Sunday school teachers are doing and teaching, what your deacons are doing and teaching, what your leadership of your church is, and what you're doing. And you let the wrong people on the platform, you let people who are not morally right come up on the platform and do things and lead things and be in the leadership roles in your church. That's on you, pastor, as he who must give account, that he may do it with joy. And when you don't deal with those people, there's no joy there, my friend. And I don't know how you sleep at night. I pastored 3 times. I couldn't sleep at night. I had to deal with some things, and it caused a lot of heartache. I had to deal with some things, and the people that didn't want to get out of their belief system, didn't want to change, they got mad at me, and it hurts. I joke about it. I wouldn't wish pastoring upon my worst enemy. It's painful, painful. Let me just say it: the ministry's painful. Whatever ministry you're in, there's pain involved, and so I hope you're getting this. And we've already gone over time, so. Let's see if there's anything that I've missed here. John says, I would never pastor a church today. I'm glad God's calling other men. Way too much junk. And I understand what you're saying, John. But if God's called you to pastor, you better do it, buddy, because you're gonna be in for more pain if you don't do the will of God. I know it's painful, but if God's called you to something, you do it. And John says, go as long as it takes. It could be hours. And so, Ladybug says, I agree with Brother Dan. All right, I try to put this on the bottom shelf. That's the kind of preacher I am. I know I get mean sometimes and yell and scream. And I can't hit the pulpit because I'll knock the phones off here, but I'm a preacher. I love preachers. I love pastors. And I'll be honest, many of the churches that I preach at, I have very little influence with the pastor, and that's sad. And I don't think most pastors understand what an evangelist is. I know they don't. Very few pastors understand the work of an evangelist and what his purpose is. Let me go further. There's very few evangelists, and I've met a lot of them. There's very few evangelists that understand what the job of the evangelist is. Let me just make one little statement. I very seldom preach a pastoral message at a church that I'm invited to. That's not my job. That's the pastor's job. I stay out of that. I have a different purpose at a church. I'm not the pastor. I'm there for a different purpose. All right, and we won't get into that tonight. But let's see, what do we got over on Facebook to read here? Not too many, I don't think. Let's see. Pat says no audio or video issues so far. Okay. Pastor's job is harder than that. Let's see. Harder than they think, yeah. All right. So I hope that's been some help to you tonight. And the pastor is the problem. Remember some months back, I said the most needed thing in America, the greatest need of America. Anybody remember that? Got a lot of answers that time, and nobody got the right one. They got some good things they said. We need Jesus, we need God, we need revival. Let me tell you what comes before all that. And I can prove this in Romans 10. How shall they hear without a preacher? How shall they preach except to be sent? In Romans chapter 10. The greatest need of America and the world, really, is preaching. Not teaching, preaching. I'm not against teaching. I do a lot of teaching. But there's a place for teaching and there's a place for old-fashioned preaching. And I always say all teaching ought to have a little bit of preaching in it every now and then. And preaching often has some teaching in there. But we need preaching. Preaching! So, that bothers some of you, doesn't it? Preaching! Ooh. Man, I love preaching. Preaching is, one guy said, preaching is the greatest thing going on in the world. It is. Preaching. Preaching to lost sinners, preaching to a church, preaching at a revival, preaching. And pastors, listen to me. Get back to preaching again. I'm serious. Pastors, start preaching again. Your church would see revival if the man of God would start preaching again. Preach. I mean, hit the pulpit something, yell, scream, walk down the aisle and be red-faced and spit a couple aisles down. Preach! Man, we need preaching. Your people need old-fashioned hellfire and brimstone preaching. It could solve a lot of the problems in our churches. The preacher, the pastor, is the problem when churches are going into apostasy. It's the pastor. The pastor is not preaching something, or he's not correcting something, or he's apostatized himself and he's leading the church into apostasy. The pastor is the problem. The pastor is also the solution to the problem. He's the guy that's supposed to fix these issues and watch for them. You're the watchman on the wall. You're supposed to be watching the sheep, and you see him straying, and you see one over here in the corner that is not, and he's backslid. Go after them. Go after them. Sometimes they need a rebuking. Sometimes they just need an arm around them. Sometimes they need a dinner at the restaurant and a conversation. Pastor them. Go after them. 40 minutes. I can't believe it. I can't do a 20-minute from a life, can I? All right, we're going to shut her down there. Facebook, I'll leave you for a second. I'll finish with YouTube, and then I'll come over and take a quick look at Facebook, see if there's anything there. And well, God bless everybody. We'll be back again sometime tomorrow, Lord willing, and see what else we can tackle. I think we're going to keep going in this direction that I'm on here for a while until God redirects me. And I've got some important things to tell you about 1 Timothy 3 and Titus chapter 1. Bishop must be. Brother John got a little taste of it last night, but he's sworn to secrecy. Right, Brother John? I've got your address, I will find you, and I will kill you. And just kidding, of course. But anyway. All right. I'll sign off here on YouTube. God bless, and keep your eyes on them skies.